Hey everyone, welcome back to this week's Primer podcast. We're kicking off a brand new series called Difficult People. And so I decided to invite my most difficult friend to come join us, Nathan Blake. In all seriousness, Nathan is an incredible therapist and counselor in our community, a dear friend of mine, and I thought had a unique perspective as we talk about the challenges of relationship that we all engage with. Nathan, why don't you introduce yourself, a little bit about what you do and your heart for this topic.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, Pete. I have been a therapist now for about 12 years. Awesome. Before I was a therapist, I was a pastor.
Hey, there you go.
I realized that was not my lot in life, nor really my calling. And I think through being a hospital chaplain, really discovered my passion for working with individuals and families and couples. And so now I do all types of therapy around relationships. So much of what people are seeking therapy for is connected to important relationships in their life.
Yeah, absolutely. I bet you have a lot of people that come to you looking for you to resolve or fix or change the difficult people in their lives. What do you do when somebody comes in and says, my mom's, giving me fits, or I'm having all these challenges with my brother or this person down the street? Like, how do you respond to that? Like, clearly you can't fix somebody else, right?
That's right. One of the things that we typically start with is this understanding that we can only really work on people who are sitting in the room.
Yeah.
We can really only do work with those that are present.
Yeah.
And in that, there is this acceptance that I only have influence over my behavior and my reactions.
Yeah.
And so I hear it often. I'll be working with clients and they'll say, I came here because I cannot stand this family member or my friend or this person at work. And what I've noticed is I'm just talking about things in my own life and reasons why I'm having this reaction, things that are in me that is triggered or cued by this other person.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, I think certainly we give space to people to talk about why folks in their life seem difficult. But where we typically come back to is, what do we have influence over? What do we have control over? And that's our own understandings, our own responses, our own ways of interacting with other humans.
Yeah, our perceptions and assumptions about them. I love my colleague Suzanne Eller always says, draw a circle around yourself. And now the only person you can work on is the person that's in the circle, right?
Right.
It's like that idea where we create all of these assumptions about other people, these perceptions about other people. And sometimes they're true, right?
Oh,
sometimes we're accurate in them, but oftentimes, like you said, they're a reflection of hurts that we have. I've been interested. We've been reading this book, How to Know a Person, or I should say I've been reading this book, How to Know a Person, by David Brooks. And he cites a study in there by a man named William Ickes. And it's an older study, but it's about, empathic perception. And so he does this study and he finds effectively that in a conversation or an interaction with a stranger, people, statistically speaking, can accurately assume or perceive their thoughts, emotions, intent 20% of the time. So that means 1 out of every 5 of their assumptions is correct. But also on the flip side, that means 4 out of every 5 assumptions that we make about a stranger are inaccurate at some level.
That's right.
But what's more shocking is he talks about how when we're with a close friend or family member, that jumps to 35%, which still means 6 to 7 out of every 10 assumptions that you make about your spouse, about your sibling, about your friend, about your colleague is likely a false assumption about them. And yet those assumptions, those perceptions, I think, at least from my perspective, are what forms in our minds these difficult people.
That's right. Yeah, I first of all, I think differentiating between difficult people and difficult behaviors.
Yeah.
That when we perceive someone's behavior is difficult, routinely difficult, that can be the label. You're just a tough person to deal with.
Yeah.
That might be true to a certain extent, but I think what we're interacting with is people's behaviors and our response to that behavior.
Yeah.
Based on our response, what's happening inside of us, we develop a narrative of who this person is, what they're about, and what we think that they believe about us.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, how many arguments with your partner do you get into because you are perceiving what they're thinking about you?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, totally.
So much of, I wonder how much of the difficulty we see in others is connected to our own fear, our own perception, our own protection.
Yeah. We're shadow boxing with an enemy that we've created. I found interesting in that study too. It said the longer that you've been married to your spouse, the less accurate you are in perceiving their intention, because you've locked them in at some point. I feel like one of the things that, Brittany and I will have conversations or difficult, conversations that we're facing with one another. And a lot of times it comes from the reality that we're perceiving each other's emotions the way that we emoted and reacted before we had kids.
That's right.
And now it's like, I had an example this morning where the kids were crazy and it was super stressful. And I was like, "Are you mad at me?" And I was like, no, the kids are just crazy and stressful. Right. And it's like, but your mind is still in that space. And again, it's how do you wrestle through that? How do you change those kind of perceptions? I do want to pause anytime we're talking about this subject. When we say difficult people, we really are talking about the challenges and the tensions that we experience in our everyday normal relationships, and the challenges that are within our capacity to engage in and shift our perceptions with. I always want to make a caveat in this that we're not including relationships that are abusive. Relationships that are hurtful. And if you're in a relationship like that, these are not conversations that say, "Hey, change your perception." Instead, seek help, and we'll help you in doing that. Reach out to our team here. Reach out to, in some cases, professionals around you to find the support that you need. So.
That's right. I'm glad you mentioned that, Pete. It was something that I sort of had in mind to chat about. That difficult behaviors, difficult people is different than abuse or
absolutely
people that are manipulative towards us or are coming at us in a way that's harmful.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So. Hey, well, I want to do something interesting. So during this study, we're looking at the Genesis account of Jacob and Esau.
Yeah.
And we're looking at that over the course of 5 weeks here. And so I want to give you Jacob and Esau's backstory.
Okay.
And I want you to pretend that Esau is coming into your office and saying, "Man, my brother is the most difficult person in the world. I need help." And I want you to give Esau some advice, and in turn, give us a little bit of advice.
Okay,
so,
sure. Yeah,
we'll open up into Genesis 25, and we'll read here in 26 through 28 here. So after his brother came out with his hand grasping Esau's heel, after this, his brother came out with his hand grasping Esau's heel. So he was named Jacob. Isaac was 60 years old when Rebekah gave birth to them. The boys grew up, and Esau became a skilled hunter, a man of the open country, while Jacob was content to stay at home among the tents. That's a turn of phrase in the ancient text. He's not like a freeloader playing video games in the basement. It meant that he's like a philosopher, right? He's a sophisticated, he's a thinker here. Isaac, who had a taste for wild game, loved Esau, but Rebekah loved Jacob. So there's some of the family dynamics, real tight there. Esau comes to you and says, "My brother Jacob is giving me fits." How do you help him begin to change his perception?
I love it. I think the first thing that I do, especially in the office, is we want to be really curious about what our response is to people's behavior. So what does it bring up in us? Be curious about what feels uncomfortable. And that curiosity is about two things.
Okay.
What their behavior is coming from, might be coming from, might be their own sense of protection, self-preservation, things that they have developed in their life to be able to survive the world around them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? We tend to, if you're walking through the grocery store, for example, and you encounter another person and you think, boy, that person is really cantankerous and angry, and why are they behaving in that way?
Yeah.
I'm always really curious about what is happening in their current world or past world that they have developed this protection against people around them.
Yeah.
So curiosity about what they might be experiencing, which leads to a bit of compassion.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? The other thing to be curious about is what is occurring within us.
Yeah.
What are the things? It could be that this person's behavior reminds us of someone from our history or someone from our present that has been particularly harmful or particularly difficult to deal with in our past. It could be that they're hitting on a fear within us.
Yeah.
If you think about getting cut off on the highway,
Right.
or someone cuts you off and you immediately become angry at them.
Right. Fear response.
It is a fear response.
Yeah.
They might perceive you as, wow, that person is really difficult. I didn't do a whole lot, you know? I accidentally turned in front of them and now they're angry at me. What you're responding to is the fear that's bubbling up within you.
Yeah.
And so sometimes folks invoke insecurity or fear within us, and our response to them is protective.
Yeah, so we're projecting upon them a fear. And so like you look at Jacob and Esau, and there's like the author has very distinctly and purposely made sure that we, the reader, know that they were not equally loved by their parents.
Right.
Right. And so for Esau, he might be projecting the hurt that his mom doesn't appear to love him upon Jacob. Right. It's not Jacob's fault. Jacob, on the other hand,
That's
maybe
right.
projecting upon Esau the fact that his father doesn't love him. It's not Esau's fault.
That's right.
But they become the face of this hurt and this insecurity. And
Yes.
yeah, that's really neat to think about it that way. So what do you do if you realize that you're projecting that insecurity on somebody?
Yeah, that's a great question. So where does curiosity lead us?
Yeah.
Curiosity leads us to openness.
Yeah.
That if I'm having a feeling that Pete, every time we talk, is being difficult.
Yeah.
He
Absolutely.
says things that I don't agree with.
Who told you to say this?
Yeah. Your whole staff.
Yeah,
Pulled me
exactly.
aside. Said, you're having a podcast with Pete. You need to tell him about himself. But I want to be curious about, what is that in me? What do I feel in my body?
Yeah.
Do I feel afraid? Do I feel scared that they're tapping on something in me that feels really insecure?
Yeah.
Do I have a perception of myself that I'm afraid other people will see?
Yeah.
That this other person is kind of invoking. I think with that awareness comes the second piece that I would encourage Esau around, and that is beginning to take less personally other people's behaviors.
Interesting. Yeah.
So that when other people are behaving in a certain way, oftentimes, and this especially happens in partnership,
Yeah.
our partners' behaviors, we often take very personally, that it's a direct attack against us, or that there's something that's wrong with us as a partner that they are seeing or recognizing. And oftentimes that's not the case. We respond based on what's happening in ourselves.
Yeah.
Our thoughts, our feelings, our needs, our wants, our desires, our insecurities.
Well, I feel like there's that insecurity. The one I feel cropping up most regularly in my life and in my friend circles and those kind of things is that fear that I'm less loved by somebody else, that I'm intentionally not being included. It's that feeling that like I texted this person something and they never responded to me. And so immediately I jump to this space of like, they're ignoring me. Not a curiosity that says, well, maybe they're really present with their kids right now.
That's right.
And like, that's something to be celebrating. Or, hey, that person that I enjoy, that they got dinner with another friend. And logically, I understand that they have other friends. But now I feel a little bit like left out and a little bit insecure about that. And
Yes.
so instead of celebrating the relationships they have and that we take it so personally, it's like, I am the center of this story.
That's right.
And if I'm the center of this story and you're not responding to me, that means that there's something wrong with me.
Yeah.
If I'm the center of the story and I'm not invited out, then maybe there's something wrong with me. Back to my example with Brittany. If Brittany's mad and I'm mad is the wrong word. If Brittany's frustrated with the kids,
Right.
but I'm the center of the story, well, she must be frustrated with me.
you.
And it's like, no, I'm
that's not the
projecting
case.
that on her. I'm projecting that on my friends.
And that invites another step in this, which is a mindfulness around our own narrative.
Yeah.
If going back to what we were talking about previously, if we're mindful of our own narrative, we are often the center of that story.
Yeah.
And so being mindful that what I am telling myself about you is directly impacting the way that I interact with you.
Yeah.
I am reacting to a feeling inside of me that's based on the story I'm telling myself in my head about you.
Yeah. That's interesting. So we're creating that difficult person in our head, and now we're reacting to the emotions that perceived difficult person is creating in us.
Absolutely.
What about the part where so Esau and Jacob are just wired differently?
Yeah.
How does that impact our relationship with one another?
Oh my gosh, that is something in close relationship that I think becomes most difficult.
Yeah.
In partnership, one of the things I think that happens is the thing that we are most attracted to in our partner in the beginning.
Yeah.
Ends up becoming the very thing that causes conflict and fights later on.
Interesting.
And it's this awareness that because someone behaves differently, we don't also have to behave that way.
Yeah.
What they like, their likes, their needs, their desires might be very different from us. And I think that's where compassion comes in, that we're wired differently from a spiritual lens. And this is something I talk with clients often about. If we look at this again through the biblical lens, how does God see this person?
Yeah.
And asking that question gives us a radically different perspective of this human being.
Yeah.
Again, as long as they're not harming us.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
What if I were talking with God about this person? How would God tell me that this person is wired? What might God accept about them that I'm having trouble with?
Right. It's this celebration of our differences, of our diversity, instead of being repelled by it.
That's right.
Honestly, I think that's why sometimes our relationships with our in-laws can be marked by tensions, because it's a different family dynamic than we grew up with. And if it's different, and I'm the center of the story, then it's wrong and mine's right. And you get into these spaces, but we do that with friends. We do that in the church all the time when it has to do with styles of worship or the different ways that we engage in group life or different community events or global versus local missions, all of these different things.
Yeah.
And so when we're always thinking of these things as a competition, it creates difficult people, it creates division. But when we view this as like this beautiful tapestry, now suddenly there's something to celebrate there in that difference.
I think of a stained glass.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
In the pieces, you might, if you saw a stained glass on the ground, you might just see brokenness.
Yeah.
But as you mold them together, the different colors, the different paints, the different shapes, end up fitting into this beautiful mosaic.
Yeah.
And every single different piece is needed.
Yeah.
It's this realization that the way that I see the world is shaped and formed by my narrative.
Yeah.
And if I'm going to become more agreeable in my life, which is one of the signs of successful relationships is agreeableness.
Yeah.
And if I'm going to become more agreeable in my life, it's not viewing people's differences as a means for defense.
Yeah.
It's viewing people's differences as uniqueness in a way that God has created them to be.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and I think that I'm changing what I was going to read here, because that stirs in me like this idea of like what we are looking for, how we are aimed, so often frames our conversation. There's this line here in in David's book that says, that gaze, that first sight, represents a posture toward the world. A person who is looking for beauty is likely to find wonders, while a person who is looking for threats will find danger.
Absolutely.
You know,
Absolutely.
And that's so
we
interesting.
will affirm the story in our head.
Yeah.
We will look for ways that our story is correct.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, if my narrative about you is that you're just difficult and hard to work with, I am going to look for examples, or I'm going to look for ways that is true, instead of how do I begin looking for ways in Pete that he might relate a little differently? How might I understand him a bit better, rather than assuming he's trying to be difficult with me?
Well, and I think that's particularly poignant in this day and age of like political polarity and division.
Right.
It's like, if I perceive anyone that thinks politically differently than me to be, you know, the greatest stereotype of those things, that's what I'm going to find.
That's right.
Right. But if I engage with that person as a person that was formed in the image of God, and as a unique expression of his spirit in this world, like, that's going to absolutely change the way that we engage with folks. You know, one of the things that I have been thinking about with this series, that's been inspired by some of the curiosity and some of Brooke's writing on creativity, is how do you tell a story when you encounter somebody that you feel difficult, or a situation that feels difficult? And you alluded to this a little bit with the person in the grocery store. How do you tell a story that's creative enough to make this difficult person the hero and not the villain?
Oh, the hero and not the villain.
Like in that story, like, how do I form my thoughts around this to say, hey, that, you know, I was saying it earlier, the reason they're not texting me is because they're super present as a parent to their kids. Hey, the reason that they're not, the reason I didn't get invited to dinner was because they're being intentionally sacrificial in inviting a neighbor over to be a blessing to them. And maybe they prefer to be hanging out with their friends, but they're doing this to engage that way. Yeah. And just, you know, that's a trick that I've had, you know, as a pastor. You get, not to say marks, actually, I haven't gotten that much, but you get a lot of, you know, like angry emails or angry feedback and those kind of things. And very early on in my career, it was almost like a self-defense mechanism. Yeah. I had to start telling stories that made out the angry parent as a hero in their kid's life. You know, stories like, hey, I know that that didn't come out like they wanted it to. Right. That maybe came out in a hurtful regard to me. But man, I love that this parent's so bought into their kid's life that they recognize the hurt that their kids experienced, and they're going to advocate for them. Yes. Right. And that was a big shift for me, because now I wasn't taking it personally every time. I was saying, okay, I can work with that, and I can engage with that, and I can learn from that myself too. And so yeah, I think that's kind of this a twist there. Have you seen creativity as being a part of that kind of invitation there? Yeah. So Richard Schwarz, he is the creator of a therapy modality called internal family systems. And one of the things that I love that he does is he has what he calls the 8 C's of self. Yeah. So when I think about self, that is the self that God has created us to be, without all the protectors, without all the things that we do to push people away. Yeah. What are the 8 qualities that we are remaining in self? Yeah. And one of those is creativity. Yeah. Some of the others are curiosity. Yeah. Compassion. Yeah. But creativity. And I think that that when we are dealing with someone who we perceive as difficult, creativity is a huge part of developing that new narrative. Yeah. I see you and I see our interactions in a certain way. How might I begin to think about it differently, if only a certain percentage of the time my perception is correct? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate this. I hope that this is a helpful conversation. I know it's a little bit longer this week, but I hope that this gives you some meat to chew on as you're considering the relationships in your life that maybe are strained and challenged. And I hope it encourages you to be curious and creative and compassionate, engaging with the folks in your circle. Hope it's a great discussion, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks, Pete.